Good morning, everyone. It's our immense pleasure to have with us Dr. Anand. Dr. is Principal Scientist, Fisheries Extension Economics and Statistics Division, ICR Central Institute of Fisheries Application, CIFE, Benchmark Road, Versova, Andheri, Mumbai. And the topic chosen for deliberation by our esteemed guest is Extension for Fisheries Development, Innovations and Insights from the Field. Sir, you are audible as well as visible. You can interact with the participants and also you can start the presentation whenever you feel feasible. Please start.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Majid, for the support and help. And then I thank Prakash and others who have given me this opportunity. And I'm delighted to see all of you. I'm just your colleague. I would like to share some experience and little expertise that we have in fisheries extension. And I know that there are yeah, the participants are mainly from no, the universities, the KVK system, and also the some of the research scholars and some ICR institutes. So you have been since it's a 21-day program, and you have been adequately exposed to the extension concepts, and then the recent innovations that have been happening in terms of a lot of domains. And so the before probably like of course I would share the presentation. What I have done is that I would wish to focus a little more on some of the uniqueness with respect to extension. Of course, the uniqueness in fisheries sector or the fisheries extension per se in relation to agriculture or animal husbandry extension. So maybe since I also have a background in agricultural extension, but I've been working with the Fisheries Institute for almost now 18 years. So I could probably, this is how I just want to share my experience, because I did not have any knowledge about fisheries since I joined the institute, except a little bit of general knowledge. But then once we the whatever the extension that during masters and PhD that we have learned, and then when we started looking at the fisheries domain, probably there were certain striking differences then which it took some time to appreciate the differences particularly, and then how do we actually relate or understand fisheries extension. Is it something similar to agricultural extension, or if it is different, how different it is, and what similarities are there? So like in terms of methods and approach and the innovations, okay, so all that. So that experience I just want to share with you, because I do understand that we now are moving into a phase where, irrespective of our disciplines, or particularly those in the frontline, the development and the extension field, they would appreciate that we are moving towards a kind of an no, pluralism, what we call extension pluralism, where we look at from the farmer or the fisher point of view, and then his requirements and demands are many that might span across crop, animal husbandry, fisheries, or forestry, okay, horticulture, all that domain. So one is supposed to be at least addressing, at least appreciating the concerns, and then help in offer a kind of a basket of services. So in that perspective, I assume that many of you, or most of you, or may not be familiar with the fisheries sector as such. So I would just give you a very brief review about our sector, fisheries sector in the Indian context, and then how fisheries extension evolved or what differences are there with relation to agriculture. I think half of the presentation will look at that, and then remaining half, 15-20 minutes, 10-15 minutes, I would look at some very select innovations or the recent field experiences that are across the sector that is happening, so that are promising to change the dynamics of fisheries extension in the years to come. And then we can have some discussion to clarify some queries or share our experiences. Okay, I think that should be fine, I hope. Yes, I need, yeah, still a lot of good morning messages coming. Yes, Prakash, is that fine?
Yes, sir. That is fine, sir.
Okay, okay.
Because in fact, this is the only lecture we have from fisheries background.
Okay.
So you can even go ahead with that introductory part and actually focus a little bit on the extension approaches in fisheries sector. That is fine, sir.
Okay. Can you all see my full screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sir. Well,
Okay. Am I audible? Can you hear me clearly?
yes, sir. Very audible, sir.
Yes, that's good. So you just alert me because I can't see you guys. I can only hear you if you speak. So you feel free to stop me anywhere, anytime. And if there is any issues with the audio or video, do alert me so that I am on track. Okay. Yes. Again, good morning and welcome once again to all of you. So this is that extension for fisheries development. I think I would roughly take about 35 to 40 minutes. Yes, this is the outline. You understand the Indian fisheries and then the fisheries extension, then some challenges and opportunities, innovations on the way forward. This is one thing like we should understand, like how probably we differ. It is my senior professor. When I joined, he just retired, and Professor K.K. Ghosh, he is one of the doyens of social science and fisheries. He often used to joke, or rather say off the line in conversations, that fisheries is something like a residual activity in a residual land, having residual water by residual people. So this is, but then being in social science, we should be able to appreciate this probably captures the essence of the people, as well as the sector, as well as the kind of the entire the fisheries extension has a lot of implications from this sentence. So this is in comparison to the different economic activities, be the primary or secondary activity, and even within primary activity of agriculture, animal husbandry, and fisheries, we would see that fisheries is often happens in the land. It is considered to be the least important in terms of whatever we can mean. Even the land where it happens is that something not useful for anything else, the fisheries. And you will be surprised to know even the first two ICAR institutes, Central Inland Fisheries Research Institute and Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute, they were established on a land that was abundant, which was not fit for any other purpose in Mandapam in Tamil Nadu and Barakpur in Kolkata. So in the present Kolkata in 1940s. So you can see, and then we all know that the fisher people are considered to be at the bottom of the social ladder in terms of their social status as well as economic status throughout the year. Though fisheries being or fishing being one of the earliest civilizational symbols or the human activity. Some quick facts about Indian fisheries. India is the second largest producer after China, contributing almost 5.5%. And we now recently, this is 2 years old data, but then we are still roughly somewhere about 15 million tons we produce, and which was only 0.5 million tons when we became independent in 1950s. So but then we almost contribute about 15% of our agricultural exports come from fisheries. Okay, so though we contribute only 5.5% to the agricultural GDP, our export contribution is 3 times more. This is something like how export driven it is, that is very, very important to differentiate. And we have a large inland sector. We call it inland fisheries and marine fisheries. And inland fisheries, we have aquaculture and capture, that is rivers. And in marine, it is mainly capture. Traditionally, earlier, if you see, we used to, lot of 2/3 of the catch used to come from marine capture. Now it is the reverse. 2/3 of the capture comes from inland. Okay, so this is one thing, and 62%. You have to please excuse me.
Sir, are you there, sir?
Sorry, I went off grid.
Yeah. Fine, sir. Please. You can continue, sir.
Start the slideshow.
Yes, I'm very sorry because there were some calls, so I had to shift my location. So yeah, we were talking about the fishery sector in general, and there now almost 16 million people are said to be dependent on fishery sector in India. Roughly about 3 million belong to the marine capture sector, all the coastal states, 9 coastal states. Remaining 12 to 13 million people are from inland fisheries and fish farmers. Overall, we contribute about 1% to the overall GDP. And this is something I would share. Very interesting small study that we did that could tell us how fishery sector has grown with respect to the food grain sector and then the milk and like dairy and poultry sectors. You will be surprised to know that overall in the 30 years from 1979, if you look at till 97, the growth rate of food grains is less than 2% at the annual compounded growth rate. Okay, so but whereas if you see the marine, the overall sector, the fishery sector grew at almost twice the rate, 3.57%. And if you look at only the recent period, but then overall it is more than 4%. It is twice the food grain sector and almost as good as poultry and dairy sector. Okay, so that means the fishery sector in the beginning grew very little, but in recent years, the growth rate has been much more higher. So this will tell you a little more detail. We can just look at how the share of agriculture in total economic value, that is GDP, has declined over the years from more than nearly close to 40% to presently only 14% in 2019. Okay, but then you look at the share of fisheries in total GDP. Okay, it is the opposite trend. That means when even the agricultural share in total economy has been declining, the share of fisheries in total economy as well as in agriculture economy has been increasing, which underscores the importance of fisheries being a kind of a sunrise sector, a growing growth sector with lot of potential and momentum. That is the point I just wanted to make here. It's just a brief thing. This is, I think you can see later the slides when they are shared. There are the resources are tremendous resources, both inland as well as marine, in terms of reservoirs, ponds, tanks, okay, and the wetlands, and then the brackish water areas. So we have a lot of resources. Okay, so yeah, and then if you see this remark, that the property is that then the resources have been underutilized. So in some sectors, even in agriculture, we would say that some resources are overexploited. Similarly, in fisheries, if you ask me, some inland, coastal waters, some areas it has been overexploited or it is almost reached the near exploitation status. But when you look at majority of the inland water resources, mainly the tanks and ponds or the reservoirs, they are really underutilized. Okay, so or unutilized in that sense. So that is why we see that the resources, the fish production growing at a faster rate than the crop production. Just to, this is one of our PhD students' work. You see here this is the fisher. The Human Development Index we just studied for the fishers, and this is for the farmers. The green one you see is for the farmers, and then this is for the farm laborers. Okay, you see here the figures. The fishers, we were surprised to find that this is the inland fishers who reside besides the reservoirs or the dams where they depend on fishing. We could see that their human development status, which consists of mainly the education, health, and the income, it is as good as farmers, or even it is slightly better. Particularly, they fared better in terms of income and health, but then they fared little poor in terms of education when compared to farmers. But they were always better than laborers. So this is just to give an idea like what is the overall socio-economic condition of an average farmer is. But then the another thing we need to understand when we talk about marine fisheries, we are dealing with how in agriculture we deal with mostly small scale farmers having holdings less than 1 hectare. In the same way, there are small scale fishers particularly constitute about more than 70% of total fishers or even the fishing vessels, okay, in capture fisheries, though the share in the total production is little less than 30%. So this is the Manipur Loktak Lake where this is a traditional subsistence fishing, and this is a typical the migrant women who dot most of the urban cities now, particularly the coastal cities, who do labor daily wage work. And this is another dam site where the displaced people. So this is another typical scenario. Most of the inland, wherever the dams have come up, the people who got displaced, some of them are farmers, they began fishing. So they do farming as well as, but mainly depend on fishing, those people who are settled on the banks of the reservoirs. Yeah, so this I think I'll just go through. So this is somehow I just want you to appreciate that how we have a majority of farmers being small scale. In the same way, in fisheries is also, it is mainly a small scale business. It has a subsistence as a way of life. They have very little surplus for the market, and but of late with advent of aquaculture, that is farming, fish farming. So slightly they have moved up the ladder in terms of small scale fish farming with market participation. But then there is also large scale fishers who tend to who have dominated the fisheries, particularly in states like Gujarat and Maharashtra, where most of the fishers are large scale because the numbers are less and the production is more and the vessel size is more. This again, we all have read about National Agricultural Research Education Extension System, but then if we talk about fisheries, similarly we have about 8 ICR institutes who are mainly involved in research and limited extension activity, and the CIFE, which I represent, we are a deemed university like IRA and DRA, where we have, besides research, we have postgraduate education as the main function. So this is the research system. And when you talk about education and extension, there are about now 27, 28 fisheries colleges almost covering all the states, except a few states like Haryana and some of the northeastern states which do not have fisheries college. Now almost all major states have fisheries colleges. So they are part of either the state agriculture universities, or in many cases now they are part of the animal, like in Karnataka, they are part of Karnataka Animal Sciences and Fisheries University. We have 2 fisheries universities. One is the Kerala, in Kerala, and in Tamil Nadu. So these colleges come under those fisheries universities. Okay, so this is the they, like SIUs, they take care of the major education programs and then the extension systems. We produce about roughly about 1,100 graduates, undergraduate students every year, and roughly about 300 to 350 postgraduates, and about 100 plus PhDs every year. This is the kind of the status of education and research. And then like we have agricultural department, we have fisheries department, which is mainly part of animal husbandry and fisheries department in most of the states. Yes. Now let me just talk about little bit about how fisheries extension as such is different or similar to agricultural extension in India. Okay. So compared to one thing that will strike if anyone in an outsider, particularly those who have got exposed to agricultural extension system, how it works, if you look at the fisheries extension system at the district level. So whatever I am saying is at the district level and state level, it is less organized, or rather the fisheries extension as such is ill-defined. Okay, because it is a very, very recent phenomena within the fisheries development. So that if the literature also, you will find, like unlike agricultural extension, the usage of the word fisheries extension itself is only 20-25 years old. It was not beyond that. You will not find any reference. Okay, so we often find fisheries development as one of the dominant themes, which included or implied some of the activities which we could classify as fisheries extension in retrospective. And why is it that so? Because there are distinct historical reasons we will see shortly. And as I already indicated, that it has obtained least priority simply because the lowest people in having the lowest strata, they were engaged in fisheries, so it was given least importance. So how do we begin to appreciate? So when I talk about fisheries extension, I mean fisheries extension and aquaculture extension. And what is the difference that you might ask? They are very, very different. Just I want you to take the analogy of agricultural extension and forestry extension. So in agriculture, who are our main clients? The farmers. And all the farmers, they own private land, or they either own or they cultivate on lease. So they are the farmers who are our clients, main clients. In fisheries, who are the main clients? Fishers and fish farmers. There are 2 groups. And these fishers and fish farmers are two different set of people. So fish farmers are someone like agriculture farmer. This fish farmer also might own a piece of land, or he might have leased out a pond to culture fish. So aquaculture, that is fish culture, whatever extension work that we do with fish farmers is almost similar to agricultural extension. So where the methods, the principles, approaches, objectives, it is all similar. You can compare it with agricultural extension, because the purpose is that we want to empower the farmers, want to increase the income of the farmers, you want to produce more fish, okay, or follow sustainable practices, and then that is our objective. And then we deal with mainly individual farmers and maybe a group of farmers. Okay, so now just let us look at fishers. Who are they, and do they own any ponds? Do they own any land? Because the resource which they depend upon, either the marine, the sea, open sea, or the reservoir or the river, or the ponds and lakes in which they fish, the resource they depend upon do not belong to them. Okay, it is a common property resource. This is one most important difference that I want you all to appreciate. So here we are dealing with the people who do not own resource, but they do depend upon it for their livelihood. And because of that, the entire extension approach and the philosophy changes from focus on increasing production. Here the focus shifts to sustainable use of that particular resource, a common property resource. Because all of you know that common property resource, like our grasslands or like our forestry. So how do we, because it probably you might be more, you might appreciate it better when if I compare forestry, that the extension we do with the people who depend on forestry, okay, forests for their minor produce or whatever, we call it joint forest management. In the same way, when we look at the fishers, and then when we talk about extension for fishers, focused at fishers, we are talking about fishers who depend on common property resources like forests, okay, and which are actually owned by a government as a custodian. They have the custodian right, and only these fishers, they have the traditional and the notional user rights over something which they depend. So here that is why historically if you see the fisheries, the fishers, because fish farming is relatively a recent phenomena, and when we talk about fisheries as such, we talk about capture fisheries, that is wild harvest of fisheries either from the river or in the ocean. So there the concept of extension or extending a technology or extending the recent knowledge and skills probably did not exist before. Okay, and because fishing being a very historically old profession, and whatever the through trial and error, through experimentation, the fishers themselves have developed or improved their technical skills. And after World War, we find that whatever the improvements in navigation and all, there was a spin-off technologies in terms of increased horsepower, better boats from the ships and all, it got adopted. And then that spill-off technology was simply picked up by these fishers without much help from the extension department, because there was no extension department as such, without much help from the public extension system as such. So this is one thing I want you to remember. That is why, in the last 70 years after independence, if we look at the role of public extension system or even research system in technology transfer in marine sector, because the motorization, mechanization, these are all the major technologies that have come, and very, very little role the public extension system have played. It is mainly the farmer, fishers and their associations. They have just picked up the technologies that were available in the market and then they transform. Of course, there were some concerted efforts, but then they were very, very limited. Yeah, I will not focus much on that. Just to give an idea, like some surprising exceptions that the Madras presidency during British period, they were the Nicholson is considered to be the father figure. Madras presidency in 1907 itself, there was a Bureau of Fisheries with the purpose, and they went on Japanese tour, and they wanted to replicate the success of Japanese. But that was some earlier efforts that you can say. The first extension effort happened sometimes in early 40s, where the Common Carp, the demonstration of pisciculture, or which was called the fish culture was called earlier. There were demonstration programs that is considered to be the earliest organized effort, we would say. And in 1974, the Fish Farmers Development Agency was the first major nationwide program that ushered in a organized effort to improve fish production, and that we can consider it as a kind of a major extension effort. There were nothing like no, it is something like the Nicholson's efforts were something like Marthandam effort, but surprisingly it was from the British rulers. They took some active interest, but then that was very, very kind of a limited effort. One thing, as I said, why during the British time, the colonial era, the focus was on the revenue and finance. I said that it is a common property because British and before that Zamindari system, all of them, the common resources, inland resources, be it big lakes, ponds, rivers, all of them were considered as a source of revenue. So 1897 itself, the laws were enacted, and the leasing was given to people for contractors. So like how land was leased out to the land tenants, and who were forced to pay taxation during British period, in the same way those water resources were allotted, and then revenue was collected, and that system continues even till today. Okay, fortunately, because of the agricultural development and then CDP program, community development program, National Extension Service in 1950s, a lot of things happened very early in agricultural extension, whereas in fisheries, it took almost only in late 1970s, things began to change at the state level. So the state fisheries department itself was part of the revenue department in most of the states till 1960s. Okay, so that tells a lot about it. And one more thing, probably I would want you to be reminded is if you look at the nomenclature of an extension officer, so we call in agriculture fisheries extension officer is the lowest, or a village level extension worker. Okay, so we had an Ottawa program, and then we have a village level extension worker, or even at the block level we have fisheries agriculture extension officer or agriculture officer at the district level. In fisheries, whom do we have? We have fisheries sub-inspector, fisheries inspector. Okay, and who is the head of the state? Fisheries warden. So you can look at the analogy. It is something like a law and order. They were all supposed to be, because these were all names created by the posts created by the British to oversee the enforcement of revenue-based regulations on these common property resources. And most of the states still continue with that nomenclature of fisheries sub-inspector and inspector. Fortunately, now at least half of the states have changed it to fisheries extension officer or fisheries development officer, but still not all states have changed. So that still reminds us of how important that colonial hangover still persists. And this is just a kind of a summation of that. Like we have, because of these historical reasons, we still have the lack of proper extension focus at the state level and the district level. And if you ask me to describe in one word, how will you describe the institutional structure at the district level? I would say it is some kind of a modified form of training and business system of extension, that is in place, okay, in fisheries, because most of the time these people are involved in the fisheries department people, they are involved in regulatory and enforcement work of leasing out water bodies, collecting revenue, okay, and then managing those water bodies, stopping encroachment, implementing the fishing ban during monsoon season, okay, or taking care of some of the subsidy programs in the marine sector, like a diesel subsidy for fishing vessels. So and with very little time for extension of the development work, okay, but things are changing recently, of course, but still as you can see, it is almost total budget only less than 5% is for the extension in many of the states. Okay, and very there is lot of vacancies, and then many states have not recruited for 15 to 20 years any people. Okay, and we talk about that this Atma and all has evolved, but still there are they are struggling to integrate all these line departments at a district level, particularly with respect to fisheries. So this is in nutshell. What here I want you to emphasize is, besides the departments and ICR and SAUs, that now the KVKs are going to, or rather I would say that are going to play a major role in fisheries development, because there in every state district there is a KVK, and then we have in some of the KVKs we have fisheries SMS and or animal science SMS or agriculture extension SMS. So they are going to play a very crucial role. And one thing is that we do have fisheries cooperatives, and then a lot of NGOs working. The fishermen associations are quite strong in most of the coastal states, but we have not made use of as partners so far. Similarly, farmers associations, particularly in states like Andhra, Tamil Nadu, and there have been some efforts. These are all other things that we will discuss. So this is a traditional problem which is there in agriculture also. The same thing in fisheries. We are trying to bridge this gap, that is the gap between R&D system and the client system. Then the weakest link in fisheries development is also the fisheries extension. We are now in the middle of a small study. We were just trying to strengthen the linkage with KVKs and the state level fisheries departments and the SAUs. And we were just looking at 7 states. We just started a study as an institutional project. We could see that you just look at I'm not finding. Okay. Look at this column. Okay. We have out of 230 KVKs in these 7 states, we could find only 13% of the KVKs. That means only 30 KVKs have staff with fisheries. Okay, but then on the positive side, if you look at the animal science KVKs, and then they are relatively far more. But then if at all we want to develop fisheries extension, we have to be looking at all these groups of people: the fisheries SMS, animal science SMS, and also agriculture extension SMS, and even I would say the home science extension people. So in that way, most of the KVKs would get covered. Why you may ask rightfully that it is not necessary to have a KVK SMS from fisheries and all KVKs. Yes, I agree. But if you just excuse me.
Yeah, no, actually, I request the participants to please mute themselves. I request the participants to please mute themselves. Yes, sir, please continue, sir.
Yes. So, but then if you just look at this average number of resources, extent of resources that are available in these districts, there are hundreds and thousands of hectares of water bodies are available. But do we have adequate number of fisheries training programs or adequate number of fisheries extension activities in these KVKs compared to, say, agriculture? No, very little. So this particular thing is what with our DDG and then extension division of ICR, we want to strengthen that linkage so that how this particular gap can be filled. Yes, this is again no kind of summing it up. One reason I would say that we have been like the traditional extension. We have continuously we were evaluating, assessing the performance of extension system, and then coming up with some new innovations to address some of the lacuna. In the same way, in fisheries also, we have mostly looked at technological solutions so far. Okay, we have probably not been able to bring the communities at the center stage, be it fishers or fish farmers. So that is one thing that we probably need to change. Okay. Yes, I'll quickly go. And we do have a lot of opportunities. As I said, that more than 40% of resources are underutilized, which offers immense scope, both freshwater aquaculture as well as brackish water aquaculture. Okay. And I think, now we'll move on to some of the innovations. There have been a number of efforts that try to bring the farmers at the center of extension, fish farmers in aquaculture extension. Unlike earlier top-down approaches, you can consider them as a bottom-up approach, or the farmers as facilitators, farmers as trainers, or progressive farmers focusing on progressive farmers, and then horizontal extension networks. Okay, so there are various names that have been given, and some various experiments from ICR and also from Orissa. They have been doing very good work with World Fish and SIFA. These efforts are trying to put farmers at the center, and then so that they become their ponds considered as the demonstration farmers or fish from FAO projects. We did successfully some experimentation in northeastern states of Tripura, Manipur, Assam, Mizoram, and all. And we could see a lot of changes, very, very positive changes. But the challenge still remains: how do we scale it up and make it as a norm? In the same way, like aquaculture field schools, like farmer field schools, as I said, this is another farmer-led extension approach being promoted by SIFA in Orissa, in Khordha districts. And they all try to, I don't want to get into the details of that, but then you will know, like any participatory, you can consider them as one of the participatory extension systems, where the farmers are the center, and then they are, because we all know that a practicing farmer can be a great influencer for technology adoption or bringing about change, or even because by showcasing them as success stories, the other farmers are more likely to believe them because they consider them as one of them. Okay, and these are all some successful efforts. And similarly, in Andhra Pradesh, NACSA, that National Center for Sustainable Aquaculture, by MPDA, that is Marine Fish Products Export Agency under Ministry of Commerce, they have been promoting, because it is an shrimp farming is an export-oriented crop. There, the farmers themselves have taken leaps in technology adoption. They imported technologies and adopted, and they lobbied government. So, but then the fisheries departments have picked up momentum. ICR has picked up, joined that aquaculture revolution, and now NASA has what they call it as a cluster farming, where it is a kind of a group farming. That is one good success story. Recently, they have come out with eSanta, that is an e-commerce platform for very, very innovative concept, like how we can anyone can buy and sell on Amazon. In the same way, for aquaculture farmers, certified farmers working with NACSA, now they can trade, they can sell and buy. The exporters can directly buy, the process can directly buy from the farmers, eliminating the middleman. So that program has just started. We need to see like how it picks up momentum. And similarly, in the capture sector or fish farming sector, there have been some instances of SHG based farming and marketing in Tripura. and the community-based Beel fisheries. Beel is a type of a wetland which is common in Assam, Bihar, West Bengal. Again, it is a common property, and they are being allotted to people who are in that village or SHG's, a group of people. And there was a World Bank program, and there had been very good progress in terms of increase in income, increase in technology adoption, and all. So in recently Lakshadweep, also they have what we call it as co-management. This you may not have come across in aquaculture, but it is something like joint forest management. One step further, it is cooperative management. It is a short form of cooperative management. It is picking up momentum in some of the Southeast Asian nations, and in India traditionally, like Pulicat Lake in Tamil Nadu or some backwaters in Kerala, they have evolved systems to manage the resources using a kind of community measures. So this in Dakshin Foundation and NGO, they have experimented in Lakshadweep about implementing co-management, because this is considered to be the best solution for common property resources management for a long-term sustainability. Because in the problem in what you call, I'll just skip this. The problem in unlike aquaculture, the problem in capture fisheries is that the problem in the capture fisheries is we need to teach them what not to do. Okay, I'll just come to that. I think. Yes, this is what I wanted to tell you, because in fisheries management, the ownership is by many people, and so there are more don'ts, because we in extension people, we are very familiar with, okay, you do this, you do that, but then people do not accept when we say that, okay, don't overfish, don't catch that fish, don't use that type of a net which will catch the small fishes. So, but then you have no other option. If you want sustainability, because marine fisheries, it is almost stagnant, very little to exploit more. They have to practice more better management practices. So that is why community management, co-management becomes much more important. And because you cannot deal with the single people here, because they work as a community. Fishing community is often the entire village is engaged in fishing. Okay, so they have a community structures in place. So you need to work with people as a commune, as a group. Okay, so that is the challenge, unlike agriculture, right? Let me just quickly go through some of the other ICT-based interventions. These are all many, like in agriculture, how we have ICTs transforming agriculture. In the same way, fisheries, a lot of initiatives, experiments have taken place. One thing that the M-Kisan and Farmers Portal, it's a good initiative, but then fisheries has not yet, except states like Karnataka and some other states, or 2-3 states, other states have not taken it or not making use of it to that extent. Similarly, Rishi Darshan. Some apps have come. I said that SIPS is again a cooperative federation of self-supporting things, and they also have a market fish production to plate concept. So these are all some of the community radios. Some lot of experiments are happening. Now, what we probably want is that this is what the fish farmers, they have to be at the middle of it. And the extensions, as I said, that extension is now pluralism. There are more than one actor or supporting agency providing extension service. Okay, so the fisheries department now is not going to be the main agency providing support system, but their job would be to be redefined to bring all players, all service providers or rural advisory service providers to one platform, or rather bring about the synergies so that they act as a facilitators and they are able to reach, because someone might be good in providing market supports, someone might be good in providing working with fish farmers, someone good with working with fishers, like the NGOs are community based, CBOs, community based organizations. So the fisheries department, now has to play a role of a facilitator or a kind of bringing synergy among multiple players and usher in what we call extension pluralism. Okay, so their job. This is one thing. Second thing is that we earlier we were happy giving only the inputs or the knowledge, but now the extension professional is supposed to be extending beyond that, beyond technology and knowledge. He has to ensure there are viable markets or the market information support. He has to ensure that where they can get the timely inputs. Okay, so or what kind of schemes they can benefit from. So it is something like they are supposed to be offering a bundle or a basket of services. So this extension pluralism and bundle of services, instead of single player working with a single service, that is the transformation we are looking for. And I think this is co-management and this way forward. I think this is only like what I have already been summing it up, and this I particularly I don't think I need to focus more on this, but I would be happy. I think yeah, we do have 10-15 minutes. I hope I would stop here, but I would want to respond to people if you have any queries.
Any questions from the participants or interaction you want to do, please start.
Yeah,
Suresh, you have raised. Please ask if you
Sir,
have
actually,
anything.
yes, sir, yes, yes. Actually, I had a little query about the differences between a fisher and a fisher farmer. Can we call a fisher farmer as a fisher?
no, fisher. We actually that is one area I did not discuss much. But fisher is someone who fishes. Okay, and farmer who fishes means that who is traditionally like either traditionally or using modern techniques, but they are involved in catching fish. Okay, he is a fisher. Earlier we used to call fishermen, fisher folk, but now universally accepted nomenclature, a general neutral term is fisher. That fisher, as per FAO definition, it means those people who derive at least say 80% of their sustenance income from catching fish. Okay, so but whereas fish farmer, he is doing cultivation, he is farming, he is bringing seed, he is putting it seed, and then he is putting feed, and then he might be employing people to harvest fish, or he himself might harvest fish, but he is involved in farming. Okay, so that is the difference between a fisher and fish farmer. Fish farmer is a cultivator, fisher is a one who fishes in maybe a private property or a common property, but then who are primarily engaged in harvesting fish. Am I clear?
Ah, yes, sir, yes, sir. But one more question, sir, I have got.
Please,
sir?
Go ahead.
In the earlier slide, in the first slide, residual activity and residual water. Does the fishing is a residual activity and the water and the marine fishing, it is a residual water, sir?
No, certainly this was what do you call, marine coastal waters or sea water is not a residual water. That particular description just captures the status of fisheries that was there, say you can say 1950s and 60s. Okay, and particularly that is more completely suitable for inland fisheries. Okay, wherever fish farming started, it started in the residual places. Wherever fisheries institutions were first set up, it was the barren land was chosen for establishing the fisheries institutes. So that is why, and then people, they would like to go for rice cultivation or something more productive. in those days when they have an option to go. When they have no other option, then fish farming. Okay, so that is a kind of a characteristic, a kind of you can say an exaggerated sense of phrase that was used by Professor K.K. Ghosh just to draw the attention. Okay, so we need not interpret it very literally. Things have changed for the better of late, because now if you look at a fish farmer in Andhra Pradesh, and an average fish farmer earns at least twice that of an average agriculture or a paddy farmer. Okay, so
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
yes.
Sir,
Yeah.
hello.
Yes,
Sir, I have one question and one clarification.
Yeah.
So, when you are defining fisher and fish farmer,
yes.
so in Karnataka also many farmers are deriving income by involving in fish farming more than 80% of the income. So whether we can call them as a fisher? They also derive more than 80% of the income from. So if they derive more than 80% of the income from fish farming.
No. You can call a farmer if he is earning 80% or more of his income from culturing fish. You can call them as a fish farmer. But if a person who is earning 80% or more of his 75%, I think, or more of his income from harvesting fish, then you can call him as a fisher. So farming and harvesting are not often the same profession or same activity. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, another clarification I want. So,
Yes.
what is the solution in Saturn to meet the advocacy requirement for the farmer, given the fact that opportunities are now there is a wide scope for them for going for fish cultivation because of our various government policies, incentives. So, with respect to policies, so what is the scope for that?
Yeah, that is what, like, there is no one size fit all solution. Recently, the Ministry of Fisheries have been carved out. Fisheries has been made as a separate ministry, and the government is giving a lot of focus on that. We have this Matsya Sampata national level program with several thousand crore allocation. So they have consolidated all development programs from the central government under one umbrella. So they have, there are schemes, there are programs available for freshwater aquaculture, for brackish water or shrimp aquaculture, for the marine capture fisheries, or fisheries in fisheries development in reservoirs and ornamental fisheries, and then for conducting fisheries training. Okay, so for all that, now there are options. Even earlier there were options. Now central government programs have been brought under one category, and in addition to that, each state departments have their own very customized programs. So now what I would say is that unlike earlier, now the development focus has taken center stage, and the state departments, most of them are very keen, since it is identified as a sunrise sector with lot of scope for potential. So I think.
Sir,
yeah, please.
You mentioned that very few scientists or resource persons in the extension department, for example, especially KVKs and other things. So in that, I have asked the question.
Okay, yeah. So that one, like, now every department is working with poorer number of people, poorer quantity, or rather lot of vacancies do exist. In fisheries department, the percentage is more. Like maybe now ICTs and the learning materials can do fill the gap to some extent. That is one thing. Second thing, like even now probably we do not need more people, because now there are people who are working or duplicating the efforts even at the district level. If we at the district level, if the KVKs or the state departments, they are able to bring in that kind of all these actors together, and with ICR institutes and KVK Ataris, there could be what we call for example, if for Karnataka, if you want you can identify few technologies and a few management package of practices, and the literature or resources, learning resources are available in local languages, which individual KVKs or individual district department need not develop. The Atari and the State Fisheries College and the ICAR Institute, they can join hands with Fisheries Department, and they develop the resource specific for that state, and that can be available in an open source platform for all KVKs, trainers, and department extension professionals to be made use of. So that kind of an effort is what is lacking. I think we have not given more focus on that. That should be, to me, for that should be the focus.
Anybody else?
Sir, I think, sir, Prakash here, sir. Yeah, Majid, you can just go through the chat box once if there are any queries.
Your voice
I have
is
some
breaking.
questions in the chat box.
What is the difference
Yeah,
between
what are
marine and water fish culture?
Yes, I am seeing. Let me just answer
One by one.
one by one. What is the difference between marine and brackish water fish culture? Yes, marine and brackish water fish culture, practically there is very little difference. There is only a small technical difference, that brackish water technically refers to a place where fresh water and salt water or the sea water mixes, but the estuaries and the backwaters, okay, where the salt concentration is relatively less than the salt in the sea. That is the only technical difference. And whatever culture happens on the ponds built on the land part, we call it as brackish water fish culture. If we are doing some cage culture or enclosed culture in open sea, we call it as mariculture. Okay, if it is open sea, you are putting cages, it is mariculture. If you are in the land, you are digging up what pond and there you have salt water, it is brackish water culture. Okay? So that is the only difference now.
Good afternoon, sir.
What are the indicators in HDI?
Yeah, HDI, it is the same as in the UNDP's Human Development Index. But then we have done and we have adapted that methodology, and then we have included same three indicators, that the fisheries, the literacy or the education in terms of adult literacy. Second, the income, the per capita income of a household, and then the third is the health status of the household. So where in the health status we have taken into account the health status of all the members of the household. So it is the Human Development Index refers to for the particular household of a fisher or a farmer.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, I want your opinion on something. That should not we make this fisheries extension institutionalized also, like that in YouTube? If you'll see many videos, they are showing that by biofloc or any other fisheries activity, you can earn many lakh rupees and something like that. And many farmers jumping for that without any knowledge, and they are coming in this. And then once they are getting the loss, they are coming to us. So we should not serve this. Also, we should control that in extension. It should not be controlled.
Yeah, you are very right, and like how we have to battle misinformation and fake news. In the same way, there are people who are out to cheat, and only 2 days ago I was discussing about the same biofloc technology. How after looking at some of the YouTube videos, I even checked with my friends who are working on biofloc, and they're all like what do you call, they probably exaggerate so much, and they do not reveal the complete information. And then many farmers, because fisheries is something unlike agriculture, where if you sow a seed, you can see whether the crop is growing or not. Everything is at least little visible to the naked eye. But in fisheries, most of the things happen inside the water, and then we are clueless. And that is why many farmers, first-time farmers, they often get cheated because of lack of information. And you are very right. Probably this is what I said, that the College of Fisheries, ICAR institutes, and with Ataris, they have to take a giant leap in terms of information and presence in the social media. Okay, so that to counter, as well as at least if you give about what is what, then probably people there, it will counter to a great extent these kind of misinformation. Yeah, you are very right.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I would like to supplement, sir. A lot of systematic studies have been conducted from the even from Department of Economics. And recently in our university also we have done a lot of studies on that. So very systematic studies have been conducted and calculated the economics of fish cultivation in inland fisheries as well as some other form of fisheries. That information can be disseminated as mentioned by sir through KVKs and some other extension agents to the farmers, so that you can refer these things and we can follow. So it has to be, dissemination has to be further stressed on this. Scientific information is also available. It's not that information is not available. It's our responsibility.
Yes, you are very right, Dayanand. Actually, we need not be reinventing the wheel again and again, because when we talk about fish farming, the basics are very clear, and it is nothing. It's not a rocket science technology, and but the problem is that whatever work that have been done in universities or research institutes, they have not been probably effectively communicated, because this is one of the, what I would say, that in fisheries probably it is more pronounced, but to a great extent it is there in agriculture also. This is what I call it as a structural problem, because when you compare it with the Southeast Asian nations, India used to train the fisheries development staff from Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam, Cambodia in 1970s. Now we are sending our people to those countries to get trained. Can you imagine? So that is the kind of a leap they have taken in the last 30 years, and where we have lagged. Why? One of the problem I see is the structural problem, where research is happening either at ICAR institutes or SAUs, whereas the development is the responsibility of the state fisheries departments or to some extent KVKs. So we are not talking to each other as much as we should be.
Yes.
Okay. So that is where this is a structural problem. This is not the case in, say, Cambodia or Vietnam or Thailand, where research and as well as extension is under the single umbrella. So this probably, a lot of innovations we are trying to make, but still, how people in these different systems under central government and state governments work, and the lack of linkages, institutionalized linkages, accountability, responsibility, so information sharing. So that is where probably we have to put our more energy and focus on.
So there is a question in the chat. Can you say something about Indian Marine Fishery Bill 2021 impact on marine fisheries?
Where is it?
Dr. Suru Livil in the chat itself.
No.
It talks
Where do
about,
I see
can
that?
you talk about fisheries, Marine Fisheries Bill 2021 and its impact on marine fisheries?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yeah. I saw the question. That Marine Fisheries Draft 2021 bill, I think I have only browsed through, because it is very, very recent. There are some issues, because the reason why this particular bill has come is, earlier twice it was brought and it got defeated in the parliament, because say marine seawater, there are two types. One is the coastal territorial waters, that is from the seashore till 12 nautical miles. Okay, till 12 nautical miles, it is the concerned state fisheries department or state governments are responsible to regulate fishing in that territorial waters. So all the states have their own legislation, Marine Fisheries Regulation Zone Act 1980s. But whereas beyond 12 nautical miles, if somebody is fishing during the India's exclusive economic zone, EEZ zone, there is no regulation so far. It is under the central government. And now the central government, because since we are exporting a lot of fish, the European Union is asking, unless there is a regulation of over exploitation or sustainable management of fisheries in the exclusive economic zone, we may not import your products. So the government is trying to fill that regulatory vacuum gap by bringing in a bill to manage the fishing in the exclusive economic zone. That is the purpose, and it has 2009 also it came, 2014 also it came, because there were some lacuna in the bill and there were a lot of debates, and now then the bills got defeated. It never became an act. So now, taking all those considerations, the government has revised the bill substantially and has proposed it. There are some issues. Now it is open for consultation, because particularly in terms of if someone, it mandates people to register the vessels twice, because already they are supposed to be registered with the State Fisheries Department, and the government wants to have traceability system in place, certification system in place, where even the area where the fish is being caught, the geological coordinates need to be recorded. So this record keeping is very important when it goes for export. So these are all the provisions, and then if somebody do not follow, what is the fine, penalty, and who will monitor? So all these are all the provisions in this system, and there are some we are also giving opinion to on comments. So probably I think this time it will sail through and it might become an act.
Any other question?
Hope I did some justice to all of you. Time.
Majid ji, if there are no questions, shall I move ahead and take one out of time?
Your voice is not audible. Your voice is not audible.
Yeah. If, are there any more questions?
I don't see any further questions in the chat. So we can proceed to the formal vote of thanks.
Yeah. Is it audible?
Yeah, the voice is low. Can you come closer to the microphone?
Yes. Now is it okay?
No. Not yet.
Yeah, fine.
Much better.
Yeah. So, anyways, actually, it was really very interesting and
No.
nice.
Your voice is not audible.
Just a minute. Now? Is it okay now?
Hello? Yes.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, thank you, Majid ji. In fact, I take this opportunity to thank our only resource person actually from the fisheries background. Yeah, is it audible?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, and in fact, although I was a bit skeptical about, since we had only one presentation on fisheries extension, but sir has made really a very nice session of fisheries, the education part, the education in Indian scenario, as well as actually and major focus or issues and challenges in the fisheries sector, as well as we had a very nice even discussion, and he has really focused nicely on the linkages as well as the coordination what is required within ICAR institutes. Happy that actually the session has been very nicely taken up, and I'm very happy for sir, although he was the only resource person with us. Only one talk we had but on fisheries, but he has really nicely covered. I'm really happy with this, and on behalf of all our participants, as well as on behalf of all our organizing team, as well as on my personal behalf, I really thank you very much for your for sparing your valuable time on Sunday, especially, sir, and also actually sharing your best experiences, maybe with regards to even Indian as well as some global experiences in the fisheries sector. And thank you all the participants, as well as thank you, sir, once again. And in the afternoon, for the information of participants, we have another session in the afternoon by Dr. Sudipto Paul, who is from IRI New Delhi, and he will be discussing about the Northeastern extension strategies. Maybe we can talk maybe
we can say it is a hill agriculture based extension strategies. And I request all the participants to join again at 2:30. And thank you once again, sir, for your valuable lecture to all the participants.
Yes, yes, it was pleasure being with you all. Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.